Have you ever had a single moment, a single question, that felt like a spark thrown into dry grass, igniting everything you thought you knew about yourself? One quiet evening, I was sitting alone, my life feeling like an endless pattern of routines and unspoken doubts, when a simple question drifted into my mind. It was not dramatic or poetic at first glance. Yet, as soon as I heard it echo inside me, it was as if a door opened to a world I had never dared to imagine. The question was this: what if everything I call me is just a story I've been telling myself? Even now, years later, I can feel the electricity of that instant. That single question changed my spiritual path forever, not by giving me answers, but by making me realize how little I had truly asked. In that moment, I began to see how tightly I had been gripping the identity I had built. My name, my achievements, my failures, my beliefs, my habits, all woven into a narrative I had mistaken for reality. The question shattered the glass and showed me the sky beyond. If my sense of self were only a story, then who was the storyteller? Was there something deeper, something older, watching the story unfold? This thought did not frighten me as I expected. Instead, it felt like relief. Like I had been wearing a heavy coat for years, and someone finally told me I could take it off. I remember walking outside that night. The streetlights glowed softly, and the air had the cool clarity of autumn. Every sound seemed sharper, every color more alive. My mind raced, but it was not panic, it was awakening. I realized how much of my life had been lived on autopilot. I had been answering questions others asked of me: what career to choose, how to behave, what to believe, without ever asking the deeper questions myself. That night, I decided to stop running from my own curiosity. As days passed, the question kept working inside me like a seed pushing through soil. I began to examine everything I called mine: my emotions, my memories, my beliefs about what was possible. Where had they come from? How many of them were inherited rather than chosen? Each time I pulled on a thread, the fabric of my certainty unraveled a little more. But instead of fear, I felt wonder. Like a child who has just discovered that maps are not the territory. I started to notice how often I said, "I am," followed by a label. I am tired. I am anxious. I am successful. I am unworthy. Each label felt like a brick in a wall between me and something vast. The question had loosened the mortar. If I were not these labels, what was I? A blank space? A witness? A field of awareness? For the first time, I realized that spirituality was not about adding more beliefs, but about peeling away the ones that no longer served me. This shift did not happen overnight. Old habits fought back. My mind tried to rebuild its walls. Yet, even in moments of doubt, the question remained like a lighthouse. Whenever I felt lost, I returned to it. What if everything I call me is just a story? With each repetition, the story loosened its grip. I became less reactive, more present. The dramas that once consumed me began to look like passing clouds rather than permanent storms. I remember one morning sitting by the window with a cup of tea. The sun poured in, and the steam rose like a prayer. I watched my thoughts come and go without clinging to them. It felt like I was seeing the world for the first time, unfiltered. Trees moved. Birds called. Life pulsed with its own rhythm, indifferent to my judgments. In that stillness, a strange joy appeared, quiet but undeniable. It was not the joy of achieving something. It was the joy of simply being. Friends noticed the change before I could explain it. They said I seemed calmer, lighter, less defensive. At first, I tried to describe what had happened, but words felt clumsy. How do you explain to someone that the ground beneath your feet has turned into sky? How do you describe the liberation of not being bound by the story you once thought was you? Eventually, I stopped trying to convince anyone. I simply lived it. Some were drawn closer. Others drifted away. But the shift in me was irreversible. That one question had done more than open a door. It had taught me the power of asking. For so long, I had believed that growth came from finding the right answers. But this experience showed me that a truly alive question can be far more transformative than any answer. A living question does not close a chapter. It opens infinite pages. It reshapes you from the inside out. As I walked deeper into this new way of seeing, I began to explore teachings from different traditions, philosophy, psychology, mysticism. Everywhere I looked, I found echoes of the same insight. The Buddha spoke of no self. Socrates spoke of knowing oneself. Modern neuroscience spoke of the brain's storytelling. Each path pointed to the same truth. Identity is a fluid process, not a fixed object. And freedom begins when you stop clinging to the mask. I realized that my spiritual path was no longer about reaching a destination. It was about dissolving the illusions that kept me from experiencing what was already here. That single question had not given me new beliefs. It had given me space. Space to breathe. Space to see. Space to choose. This was not a path away from life, but a path into it, raw and unfiltered. As this new space unfolded in me, something even more surprising began to happen. The world around me didn't change, but my experience of it did. Ordinary moments became luminous. Waiting in line at the grocery store, I felt a quiet connection to the strangers beside me, as if we were all actors briefly sharing a stage. Walking through a crowded street, I noticed the expressions on faces, the rhythm of footsteps, and the invisible currents of stories moving past each other. The sense of separation I had always taken for granted began to dissolve. It wasn't mystical fireworks. It was subtle, like a fog lifting to reveal a familiar landscape in new clarity. With this shift came a soft compassion, first for myself, then for others. I began to see how everyone, like me, was living inside a story they had inherited or constructed. The person who cut me off in traffic was not my enemy. They were a bundle of fears, hopes, memories, reacting from their own narrative. The friend who misunderstood me was not betraying me. They were simply seeing me through the lens of their own story. This realization did not make me passive. It made me freer. I could respond instead of react, listen instead of defend, and forgive instead of resent. That single question had planted the seed of empathy. One evening, I sat with my journal and wrote down all the I am statements that had defined me. I am shy. I am ambitious. I am spiritual. I am unworthy. I wrote them out until the page was full. Then I asked myself, who is the one who writes these words? I couldn't answer. But in that silence, I felt an expansive awareness, like standing on a mountain peak above clouds. For a few moments, there was no story, no identity, just presence. It felt like freedom. It felt like home. From that point, my practices shifted. Meditation was no longer a task, but a natural return to this spacious awareness. Reading philosophy was no longer an intellectual pursuit, but a mirror reflecting the same insight in different languages. Even challenges and pain took on a new texture. When fear arose, I could watch it without fusing with it. When joy appeared, I could savor it without clinging to it. Life became less about controlling outcomes and more about participating in a larger unfolding. Of course, the mind still tried to pull me back into its old patterns. Doubts would whisper, "You're imagining this. You're fooling yourself." Some days, I felt as confused and restless as before. But the difference was that now I knew I was not my confusion. I could hold it gently, like a passing storm. The question that had started this journey continued to guide me. What if everything I call me is just a story? Each time I returned to it, the grip of fear loosened a little more. As months turned into years, this living question began to reshape my choices. I left a job that no longer resonated with my values. I deepened relationships that felt authentic and let go of those built on old roles. I stopped striving to appear a certain way and began to act from a quieter integrity. Decisions still carried risk, but the fear of change had lost its teeth. I understood that every ending was also a beginning, that every shedding of identity revealed a truer self beneath. In this way, the question was not just a mental exercise. It was a compass. The most unexpected gift was a sense of wonder. I began to wake up each day with curiosity rather than dread. What would this moment reveal? What story might I be ready to release today? Life, which had once felt like a scripted play, now felt like an improvisation with infinite possibilities. I realized that spirituality was not an escape from reality, but a fuller embrace of it, stripped of the illusions that made it feel small. Looking back, I see how one question can act like a key, not because it unlocks an answer, but because it unlocks you. It invites you to step out of the cage of certainty and into the open field of awareness. It calls you to examine the beliefs you inherited, the patterns you repeat, the fears you protect. It invites you to become conscious of the storyteller and, in doing so, to remember that you are more than the story. Perhaps you, too, have felt the pull of such a question. Perhaps you've glimpsed a truth that frightened you and thrilled you at the same time. If so, don't ignore it. Sit with it. Let it do its work. A real question is alive. It will challenge you, undo you, and in the process reveal a freedom you didn't know you had. That is its gift. So now I turn the mirror toward you. What is the question that has been whispering at the edges of your awareness? What inquiry, if you dared to follow it, might shift your path forever? Share it in the comments below. Your insight might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Remember this: a single honest question can open more doors than a lifetime of borrowed answers. It can lift you out of the gravity of habit and into the orbit of possibility. It can remind you that you are not a fixed identity, but an unfolding mystery. By embracing the question, you become the seeker and the path at once. If this message resonates with you, give this video a like and subscribe to this channel for more content like this. Together we can learn not only to ask deeper questions, but to live them, transforming our fear into freedom and our stories into gateways of awakening.